Ever wonder why some people thrive under pressure while others crumble? Or why a friend sticks to a habit like clockwork, but you struggle to do the same thing even once? It's not just discipline or motivation. It might be your personality's response to expectations. This is a summary of the Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin, an independent summary created for educational purposes. If this summary resonates with you, I encourage you to purchase the full book and explore it in greater depth. Rubin presents a powerful framework for understanding how people respond to inner and outer expectations. By identifying whether someone is an upholder, questioner, obliger, or rebel, we gain clarity on what drives behavior, what blocks progress, and how to communicate more effectively. Whether you're trying to get healthier, work smarter, manage a team, or support a loved one, knowing these tendencies helps remove friction and build momentum. The entire system stems from one deceptively simple question: how do you respond to expectations? Outer expectations include work deadlines, social norms, or requests from others. Inner expectations include personal goals, resolutions, or habits you set for yourself. Rubin categorizes people into four distinct types based on how they meet or resist these expectations. Upholders respond readily to both inner and outer expectations. These are the disciplined list makers who stick to resolutions without reminders. If a task is on their to-do list, they'll get it done, whether someone's watching or not. Upholders thrive with structure and rules and tend to value self-mastery. However, they can also be inflexible, overly rigid, or judgmental of others who don't share their mindset. Questioners question all expectations. They need to understand the why before committing. If a rule makes sense to them, they'll follow it. If it feels arbitrary or inefficient, they'll resist. This inner logic acts as their compass. Questioners can be highly autonomous and data-driven, but they often fall into analysis paralysis, struggling to act without sufficient information or clarity. Obligers meet outer expectations easily, but struggle with inner ones. They'll go to the gym if a friend is waiting, but can't maintain the habit alone. These people thrive on external accountability, deadlines, feedback, social obligations, and will often overextend themselves for others. But without outside pressure, they stall. Over time, the tension of unmet inner needs can lead to what Rubin calls obliger rebellion, a quiet, sometimes explosive refusal to meet any expectations at all. Rebels resist both inner and outer expectations. They value freedom and self-determination above all. Rebels hate being told what to do, even by themselves. Their motivation comes from choice, identity, and spontaneous desire. While fiercely independent and creative, rebels often struggle with consistency and planning. They can also be frustrating to others who rely on predictability. Rubin emphasizes that no tendency is better or worse. Each has strengths and challenges. The key is self-awareness. When you know your type, you can stop trying to force yourself into someone else's system and instead build one that works for you. That insight alone removes a lot of self-blame. It's not that you're lazy or undisciplined. Maybe you're an obliger who just needs a little accountability to stay on track. Interestingly, Rubin's research shows that the most common tendency is obliger, 41% of people, followed by questioner, 24%, upholder, 19%, and rebel, 17%. This explains why so many people fail to keep New Year's resolutions. Those are inner expectations, and without external accountability, most people just let them slide. The framework also sheds light on countless interpersonal frustrations. A boss who's an upholder might feel baffled by a rebel employee's refusal to follow procedures. A parent who's a questioner may overload a child with too many justifications, when all the child really needs is some outer accountability. The beauty of the system is its simplicity. One core distinction, response to expectation, reveals a huge amount about why people act the way they do. Rubin stresses that tendencies are not shaped by age, gender, upbringing, or culture. They're hardwired. And while some people may tip toward an adjacent tendency, most fit cleanly into one camp. For example, an upholder may lean slightly toward questioner or obliger traits, but their core response to expectations remains stable across time and context. Understanding your tendency isn't about limiting your identity. It's about liberating your choices. Once you know how you naturally respond to demands, you can tweak your environment to fit your strengths. A questioner might stop agonizing over a system they didn't design and start building their own. A rebel might create habits by reframing them as expressions of identity, not duties. And an obliger can finally let go of guilt and instead build in the accountability that fuels their best self. The key to making this framework truly useful is not just identifying your tendency, but learning how to apply it to your daily life. Rubin dives deep into the specifics of each type, highlighting the core psychological patterns that drive behavior and showing how they appear in real-world settings like work, relationships, and health. Take upholders, for instance. Because they respond to both inner and outer expectations, they're often seen as reliable, disciplined, and independent. If they decide to start journaling every morning, they'll probably stick with it. If their manager sets a deadline, they'll meet it without needing reminders. This consistency is a massive strength, but it can also lead to rigidity. Upholders may struggle when rules change unexpectedly or when they face unclear expectations. They often feel anxious when they can't plan ahead or check something off their list. And because they expect others to be just as responsible, they might come across as impatient or overly strict. What helps upholders thrive is clarity and structure. If they know what's expected and why, they can operate at full capacity. But they also need to guard against becoming overly rigid or falling into what Rubin calls upholder tightening, where an initial habit or rule becomes so deeply ingrained that it starts to control them instead of serving them. For example, an upholder might start a 10,000 step per day routine and later find themselves pacing around the house at night to hit the number, even when they're sick or exhausted. It's not about giving up discipline. It's about remembering why a habit exists in the first place. Questioners, on the other hand, bring a very different energy. They need things to make sense. They'll follow a rule if it passes their internal logic test, but not just because someone says so. This makes them self-motivated and efficient, but it also means they can get stuck in overthinking. If a questioner doesn't believe a doctor's recommendation is justified, they might ignore it. If a manager asks for something without explaining why it matters, they might resist doing it. The upside is that questioners are often innovators. They question the status quo, which can lead to better systems, smarter processes, and fewer wasted steps. But they also need to watch out for decision fatigue. Because they feel a need to evaluate everything, they can delay action and overwhelm themselves with research. Questioners do best when they give themselves limits, set deadlines for research, define what enough information looks like, and learn to trust credible sources. Once they've built a system they believe in, they'll stick with it consistently. They don't need external accountability. They just need to be convinced. Obligers operate in a completely different space. Their key strength is reliability, but only when others are counting on them. They'll wake up at 6 a.m. for a group fitness class, but hit snooze if they plan to work out solo. They're the ones who stay late at work to finish a team project, but feel stuck when it comes to personal goals like writing a book or saving money. This makes them incredibly valuable in group settings. They're loyal, responsive, and dependable. But without external accountability, even their most heartfelt inner goals tend to get sidelined. This internal conflict can lead to burnout and resentment. Obligers often give and give until they hit a wall. Rubin calls this state obliger rebellion, a sudden refusal to meet any expectations, even ones they previously accepted without protest. It can show up as quitting a job, ghosting people, or abandoning routines. The rebellion often feels like a relief, but it's usually followed by guilt or regret. What obligers need isn't more discipline. It's better systems of support. External accountability is their magic ingredient. That could be a coach, a group, a deadline, or even a friend checking in. Rubin stresses that this isn't a weakness. It's simply how obligers function best. Once they understand that outer accountability is non-negotiable for success, they can build it into any goal and thrive. Then there are the rebels. This group resists both outer and inner expectations. If you tell a rebel what to do, even politely, they'll likely resist, even if it's something they want to do. The only motivation that works for a rebel is freedom and identity. They need to feel like a choice is theirs. A rebel won't respond to guilt, pressure, or rational arguments. But if a task aligns with their values or sense of self, they can pursue it with tremendous energy and passion. This makes rebels uniquely suited to situations that demand creativity, bold thinking, or breaking norms. They don't mind standing out or challenging authority, but also means they struggle with routines, deadlines, and anything that feels imposed. Traditional productivity advice usually backfires for them. What works instead is choice and ownership. If a rebel identifies as a runner, they'll run. If they think of themselves as someone who doesn't waste money, they'll naturally manage their finances. But the moment something starts to feel like an obligation, it becomes repellent. Helping rebels succeed requires a mindset shift. Not, you should do this, but here are your options. Giving them control over how and when something happens allows them to commit on their own terms. And when they choose something for themselves, their drive can be unstoppable. Understanding these four tendencies becomes even more powerful when you start to apply them in everyday life, not just to yourself, but to the people around you. Rubin makes it clear that miscommunication, frustration, and unmet expectations often stem not from laziness or incompetence, but from a mismatch between tendencies. If a manager keeps trying to motivate a rebel with rules and procedures, they're setting themselves up for conflict. If a spouse pushes an obliger to just be more disciplined, they're ignoring the structural support that obliger actually needs to follow through. One of the most practical insights in the book is how to speak the language of each tendency. With upholders, clarity is key. Give them the expectation and they'll likely follow through. Questioners need reasons. They'll cooperate if it makes logical sense. Obligers need to know someone's counting on them. They need social stakes. Rebels need freedom. Frame things as choices or opportunities to express identity. The most effective way to motivate someone isn't about pushing harder. It's about tailoring your approach to how they naturally operate. Rubin also explores what happens when people with different tendencies interact, especially in close relationships. A rebel parent might frustrate an upholder child with their unpredictable routines. An obliger boss might have difficulty setting boundaries because they're so tuned in to meeting their team's needs. A questioner teacher might unintentionally overwhelm their students with endless justifications. The more aware we are of our own type and the types of those we deal with, the more we can anticipate tension and adjust our expectations or communication style accordingly. Interestingly, pairing tendencies can also enhance outcomes when done consciously. For example, a rebel-obliger partnership might work well if the rebel inspires bold action and the obliger keeps things grounded. A questioner-upholder duo might cover all bases, logical reasoning paired with strong execution. But without awareness, these differences can easily turn into friction. That's why Rubin stresses the importance of mutual understanding. People don't need to change who they are. They just need to recognize what they need in order to thrive. A particularly helpful insight is that people often assume others are wired like them. Upholders may not understand why someone needs to be reminded. Questioners might get annoyed when people comply without asking why. Obligers can feel disappointed when no one gives them accountability. Rebels bristle when others try to organize them. Rubin encourages readers to move past these assumptions and learn to observe behavior instead of projecting their own values. This makes everything, from team projects to parenting, run more smoothly. Rubin also discusses how each tendency approaches major areas of life like work, health, and relationships. When it comes to career, for instance, obligers tend to thrive in structured environments with deadlines and oversight. Rebels need autonomy and variety. Questioners do well in roles that allow them to optimize systems or challenge the status quo. Upholders excel in fields where consistency and independence are prized. But she also points out that any tendency can succeed in any field. What matters is recognizing how to adjust the environment or habits to suit the underlying wiring. Health behavior is another area where tendencies play a massive role. Many doctors and therapists fail to get results not because their advice is wrong, but because it's delivered without consideration of the patient's tendency. Telling an obliger to just make time for yourself is useless unless it's paired with a strategy for outer accountability. Telling a rebel to stick to a routine might backfire unless they're encouraged to reframe it as a personal challenge or an act of identity. The message might be correct, but the delivery has to match the psychology. Perhaps the biggest benefit of the Four Tendencies is the relief it brings. Instead of assuming something's wrong with you or someone else, you begin to understand that people simply operate differently. That clarity dissolves self-doubt and frustration. If you're an obliger who's failed to keep a journaling habit, the solution isn't to shame yourself. It's to join a group or make a public commitment. If you're a rebel struggling with structure, the goal isn't to become an upholder. It's to build flexible systems that align with your values and allow spontaneity. Rubin ends the book by reiterating that this framework is not meant to box people in, but to give them a tool. It's not about limiting potential. It's about unlocking it. By understanding how we respond to expectations, we stop fighting our nature and start designing lives, habits, and systems that actually work. And once you start noticing these patterns, you'll see them everywhere, in your family, your office, your friendships, even in yourself on your best and worst days. The magic of the Four Tendencies is that it doesn't just help you know yourself. It helps you move through the world with more compassion, flexibility, and success. Here are 5 practical, memorable takeaways from the Four Tendencies. 1. If you're an obliger, don't rely on willpower. Build outer accountability into everything that matters to you. 2. If you're a questioner, set boundaries around research. Otherwise, you'll delay action by chasing perfect logic. 3. If you're an upholder, watch for rigidity and tightening. Not every rule needs to be followed forever. 4. If you're a rebel, make habits an expression of your identity. Say, I'm the kind of person who instead of I should. 5. To motivate others, speak to their tendency, not yours. Tailoring your message is more effective than pushing your default approach. You've listened to a summary of the Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin, created independently for educational purposes. If it resonated with you, consider buying the full book to explore it in greater detail. That was a thoughtful way to spend your time. Have a cup of tea, relax, and let the ideas settle in.